Yeah, let's talk about Alson and at one time such a thriving community and now not so much. Like what happened?
Mm. Um, well, can I start with my own journey with
Yeah,
Allison, if you
yeah,
don't mind?
sure. Mhm.
I was a young mom in the 80s, and my son was born with a lung disease. And I heard that they were going to give a permit to a facility in Allison to burn PCBs, which is just awful, right? And so I just got in my car and I formed a group called Mothers Against Air Pollution. I went out to Allison, and it was truly an awakening for me. I mean, it's not that far away from South Baton Rouge, where I live, and the stories that I heard and the pain that I heard from the people there. So, and since I've been doing this work all my adult life, right, I've been hearing the pain that's been in that community, but it seems to have accelerated as there's more growth in that community. But a lot of the folks who are older than I am were telling me back then, we had gardens and, excuse me, these beautiful gardens, and we were well, and they felt like they had high rates of cancer. They had nosebleeds so severe they had to go to the hospital. They'd have chest pains. I was just like overwhelmed. And so we tried to help them. We did stop that in that area, but it's a heavily burdened area. Florence did something called Miss Robinson's Neighborhood, and on the play on that theme there with the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood, and it had all the industries and what it put out into the neighborhood, and it was disproportionately so much higher in North Baton Rouge compared to where South Baton Rouge is. So I learned from very early on in this journey that people, low income, minority folks, are disproportionately impacted.
Yeah. And why is that? You can talk to some people and they will say, you know, industries can get away with it. Do you feel that's part of the problem is that, once some plant or some whatever is built in an area and it's been approved, it's been built, and another one wants to come, it's much easier for a second one to get there and a third and a fourth as opposed to that first one.
It's a great question and something I struggle with myself, and people have asked me many times. One thing, we're blessed by the Mississippi River, and that is a great draw for industry. They love being along the mighty Mississippi River, all the way, way up past us and down below Baton Rouge. So that was a big draw. And also, years ago, I'm talking 30 years ago, I read something where industry said going into many of these communities, we're very polite people, we're very faith filled people, and we don't have the inclination to fight authority. In other words, we didn't empower ourselves to say no in many instances. They just kind of, I mean, after all, let's be honest, people are worrying about their jobs, they're worrying about their children, they're worrying about other issues. So sometimes thinking about the environment wasn't always something that they had the luxury to get involved in back then. So I think it's very complicated. I don't think there's one answer, but yes, I think once one comes in, then another one comes next door, and then you see what Allison looks like. I'm sure you're going to show a visual of it.
Yeah.
And it has, I used to say it has this fence of tank cars, trains. It's crazy. Instead of, like a regular fence in front of the industry, they just have all these railroad cars. And it's very scary for people who live there. Noisy, scary. And one of our members just passed away not too long ago. And then, of course, Florence was out there. So,
And
and
I
lots of,
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the noisy aspect of it and just all the activity, especially with the landfill there, because after the 2016 flood, that's where everybody's waste went, to that
correct.
landfill, and so the activity was 100-fold from what it was before, and now that's still going on. You would think what almost 5 years after that flood that activity would have slowed down, but it's still so busy.
That we actually fought that landfill with Juanita Stewart, who just passed away in the community, and other folks. We weren't successful, obviously. And then they came up for their another permit, right, to go on another 20 years to extend the life of the landfill. And we fought as hard as we could. And I have never probably heard as many heartbreaking stories as I have from the community members, particularly those that are around it or anywhere near it. And if you've seen it, it's like the only hill, right? I mean, it's crazy looking, and the odors, the noise, the activity. It's a lot for the community to bear, and I don't understand why um, sometimes the department doesn't hear those voices in the way they should. So it's a painful thing for me, for all of us, right?
Right. No,
We would we would wish we didn't have to talk about it.
yeah.
Ready to close, whatever they need to do to close it, because a lot of the people who are fighting it are getting older, like I am, and it's hard. It's a tough fight to hang in for something for 20 years. But as you know, it's not just this one landfill. I want to be clear about that.
Yes.
There's lots of other facilities there that could impact their health, and they feel that it does. So that's something we need to do. We work on trying to lower exposure, make sure that where you live is healthier.
And then let's talk more about that, because it is all about the exposure, and where we are as a society, being so dependent on fossil fuels and things like that, and what's hurting our environment, um, and emissions and things like that. No matter where you live, you are exposed to something in some kind of way. But here, they are exposed at such a higher level. Uh, touch on that, and how that exposure really makes it like a negative impact on someone's health.
Well, I'm going to speak for what I'm going to share with you what I've heard. Right, I was in a community. Is it okay? It's not in East Baton Rouge Parish, but
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
okay. In another parish several years ago, and the community members were coming up and saying what we kind of touched on before. I can't grow a garden anymore. I don't hear birds anymore. I get rashes where my skin peels off. Um, there were so many signs of exposure for these people, and all they wanted to do was have a healthy environment, live in a safe place, feel like, not just the noise, but this these odors and all the things that they're exposed to, they believe affects their health, and I do too. I'm happy to say that I am sitting on the governor's task force, a smaller committee of industry and manufacturing, and part of what I hope we can bring to is that this just isn't about numbers and things that are released. This is about people and impacting their health and their life and their very future, right? And I know that from my own personal experience. So I would also like to discuss about the fact that I think environmental justice has actually been an issue that's brought many, many people together. It's been very inclusive.
Yeah, go ahead. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because and that's something that we talked about yesterday on the phone. Just how it's not just one segment of the population who is talking about this. And it affects everybody.
It does. And I've been lucky enough to go into many Black communities, work with Hispanic people, Vietnamese people. So it's brown, Black, yellow, poor white people. It depends on where you are. It's a lot of economic. Uh, Part of it is economics. You live in a poor area and this big industry comes in. But I feel like we have helped bridge that. We have discussions, we have this common issue. It brings us together, regardless of whether, I'm a white woman, you're a Black woman, we're mothers, or we're community people. And we love where we live. We love our state. We don't want to be called the dumping ground of the world, right? Or someone said we're the Statue of Liberty of hazardous waste. What a horrible image, right? And then, of course, a lot of people talk about Cancer Alley. And I remember it was actually the union who put up that billboard during the BASF lockout, and it said, "Welcome to Cancer Alley." So they're the folks who actually coined that term. And that, to me, is painful. Don't you think?
No, definitely, especially like you said, we love our state.
Yes.
And you talked about it earlier, just how we are a melting pot. We're so much culture and all that great stuff that we love so much here, but these things are slowly destroying the people who make such a big part of the fabric of all that.
Yes, and I've been remiss. It's hard to remember everything. We have a Native American woman on our board, and I'm going to be on a Zoom call with her today. And the Native Americans here, the Iltishan Charles, the Biloxi, the Chitimacha, the Homa Nation. I mean, they are very heavily impacted by the environment, both the industry, but also the natural environment of hurricanes and things like that. So I don't want to leave them out. I think this is an issue that we can actually all agree on. Who can say, well, I don't want to have clean air and clean water and clean land? And that's why when I started, people called me some pretty awful names. But in actuality, I consider myself a conservative, not party wise, but I just want this earth to be better. I feel like we're drawn to be stewards. We are our brother's keepers. If I go out into this neighborhood or a community where they've invited me and they're suffering, how can we turn our back? And so that's why I was lucky enough to be one of the founders of this organization, of which I would say truthfully I was going to do this for 6 months, and I've probably been doing it longer than you've been on the earth. I'm grateful to be here, and it's wonderful to have all the different ages, that have a lot of experience, and then younger people who have the enthusiasm. And I think people are awakened. I think we talked about that yesterday a bit too. This has become an issue that, for me in my career, has ebbed and flowed. But I'm really happy that it's becoming more important as the world's becoming smaller, really, by the media, right? You're bringing us news that we wouldn't normally have, and things that we don't want to see sometimes, but we have to. We have to see it to be able to make change.
Well, it's been an incredible 6 months for you. I'll say that.
I know. Yeah. Yes, indeed. And it's a really wonderful honor and privilege, because I've buried, unfortunately, a lot of the leaders that I've worked with. And one of our leaders in Allison, if you don't mind me sharing this story, we talked about it a bit yesterday. He was a hunter, and he found a lot of tumors in the livers of the wildlife that he would catch. I mean, shoot, probably, and then fish that he would eat. And when he was dying, he looked at me and he said, "MaryLee, promise that you'll tell my story, that my death won't be in vain, that there's something wrong here in this community." He died, he was about 52, 54. And I take that to heart with all our leaders, that those of us who are still left need to continue to tell their story and try to make this world a better place and safer to live in.
Definitely. One story at a time, because that's the impact there, because people can relate to those things when they hear what someone has gone through.
It's so true. I'm a mom, and and I love you men. Nothing against you men, but I think moms have the instinct to, protect their children, or maybe their husband works for industry and they're concerned. So I love that we are a conduit for those folks to be able to have someone to hear them. Sometimes you need someone to hear your voice and also to empower you. My definition of success is when we're in a community and trying to help them, and then they get up and they're far better than I could ever be, or anyone else could be, because that's another thing. You know your story. Don't let someone who has their doctorate or whatever intimidate you about what's happening to your body, what's happening to your air and your land. I mean, only you can tell your story. So we really encourage people. And I think it makes, like you said, people understand it more. It's more personal. I mean, how can it be more personal than if you have a son born with a lung disease, or your husband is a worker who's having, too much exposure, or whatever the issue might be. But we are very sensitive about the economic component of this. We don't want to hurt anybody. We want to just help people.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else you'd like to add, maybe that I may have missed, or? I could talk to you all day, but I know we don't have all day.
But I have as much time as you want, but that's the problem when you've done this for more than 30 years. You got a lot of stories. And, sometimes it makes, um, bless my staff that helps me, they're like, oh boy, here comes the story again. But I am very story related. I grew up in New Orleans, by the way, and then moved around the state for a while and ended up in Baton Rouge. And stories are powerful, and music is powerful. We use art, we use music to help people because sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. I want to invite you, though. We don't use this, but I want you to know we've created this center to honor these wonderful people, and we're going to have a gallery. We had a young man who's now in his late 70s who took 8,000 slides and photos, and there's some incredible pictures of Allison. And there's a great picture of me with Kip Holden. And
Oh wow.
can I tell that story real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was Mothers Against Air Pollution and fighting the PCBs that were going to burn in Nelson. And there were 6 of us, and we were so nervous. One of my friends that was helping me, her hair started to fall out. I'm not kidding. We were just moms trying to make a difference. And we went to the Centerplex back then, right? And we gave out white ribbons to signify clean air. And people came out on the stage. We were just in the audience, of course. And this gentleman came out, and it was magnificent. He was talking about the people and the health of the people and the community. I'm like, on me, I was like, who is that? And they said, that's City Councilman Kip Holden. I'm like, whoa. He was like an angel, for real. And I'm lucky enough to have followed him when he went to the House and the Senate, and then to be mayor 3 times. And he was very, very conscious of the environment. And I do want to make this really clear. In the 80s, way back when, you had conservation and environmental groups, right? There was a big divide. People who worked on the natural resources, and that's fine. But we're about people, people, people. We want to preserve those natural resources because they're a reflection of what can happen to us, right? The birds, the wildlife. But we're about people and their health and making it a safer and better Louisiana. And we're the only homegrown, we call it, environmental statewide group. And I'm really proud of all our leaders, which is why I do invite you to come visit us at some point. I think you find it very interesting, the 36 years or so worth of history that we have documented through tapes, through you name it, media. It's an extraordinary thing, and I feel very lucky to be able to help continue move that message forward. But more importantly, for young people who come to us or people who make documentaries, they don't necessarily know the real history of what's happened here, right? How better to know the real history than listen to the game changers who, by the way, didn't think they were environmentalists. They just wanted to help their community. They wanted their community to be safer. They just wanted to be remembered as someone who did their, quote, kind of civic duty. Environmental or being an environmentalist was an important thing to be labeled for them. And actually wasn't very popular back then.
Right.
It wasn't easy being green, like Kermit says.
That's so true.
Oh, Lord. People call me some terrible things. That's a whole other interview. It was very,
I
very.
can imagine.
Oh my gosh, it would make your ears fall off. It's words we can't use. But the positive thing about it is it's changed so much. The community comes to the center, industry comes to the center, people come together to make change, have resolution to issues. We're working on Save Our Water, and I talked to many, many different people about it, and it's great. So I think maybe some of those names have changed for me. I hope.
But yeah, I would love to come and see the center and those pictures and listen to some of the audio. I would love it.
We would love to have you. And we had a young woman come from another form of media, written, and she sat in that space with the women. And I told her this woman made a great change. She couldn't read or write. This woman was fighting a landfill, and she ran for the House of Representatives and served 3 terms. She had $7,000. So I just shared those stories with her, and then I left her to sort of be in that space. And she cried.
Wow.
She wept. And to me, it was a sign of her feeling their sacrifice in a good way and how much they loved our state. And we have that common theme, right? We love it. We want it to be better, and we're here to try to make that happen. So I would be very honored if you'd come see us.
Oh, definitely. I'm gonna make that happen.
Good. That's a good thing. And maybe we can do a half hug.
Yes, yes, a half hug.
A half hug. I'm telling you, I'm getting really brave. I did 2 half hugs yesterday. And, but I'm hoping, I thank you, one, for your care and interest on this issue. It's something I have been lucky enough, first, my family. My family is the most important. But then trying to make this world just a tiny bit better has been my decades quest. And many, many people along the way have helped. And there are new people now, and that's wonderful. New blood that are eager to make this better.
Definitely. Oh,
Make the foundation of that house strong.
and you need that foundation to keep the house up.
We do, we do. I want to start into a song, but I promise I won't.
All right, Mary Lee, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.